I have been in a creative slump for the past few months. I was looking everywhere for some inspiration, but I got nothing. I was burnt out and I had no ideas on what I wanted to make. But starting around a month ago, I decided to revisit some of my favourite animated movies from my childhood. Movies such as Lady and the Tramp, A Jungle Book, and of course Bug's Life. If you saw my most recent video, you'll know. During this time, I discovered why I loved so many Disney movies as a kid, and watching them back as an adult has been some of the most fun that I've had in a while, finding nostalgic gems daily, which inspired today's video. Now, Disney was on top of the world in the mid-60s, having released absolute classics over the years such as Bambi and Snow White, but after the deaths of Walt in 1966 and Roy in 1971, Disney began to stumble during this time. There was some gems that I enjoy, such as the Aristocats and Robin Hood, but the 80s was one of Disney's worst decades, releasing mainly critical and commercial failures in comparison to the glory days of the 40s and 50s. The lowest point, I guess you could say, came in 1985 with the release of The Black Cauldron. It was an expensive dark fantasy movie that bombed so bad that it was beaten by the Care Bears movie at the box office. This caused the Disney executives to seriously just consider shutting down the animation department entirely to focus on theme parks and live action movies, which would have been a terrible mistake. The saving grace of the studio can be attributed to the hiring of Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who saw animation as a prestigious art form instead of a simple hobby to profit from. Now, between 1989 and 1999, we saw the Disney Renaissance across 10 movies, starting with The Little Mermaid and ending with Tarzan.
Go back, I want to be monkey!
Disney was once again becoming a cultural phenomenon, grossing over $3.8 billion across its 10-year run. So when people discuss the Disney Renaissance of the 1990s, they often mention the epic story and beautiful animation of The Lion King, or the gothic romance of Beauty and the Beast. But around this time, tucked away in the spring of 1995, was a smaller, more intimate project that has arguably aged better than many of the Renaissance films. I'm looking at you, Pocahontas.
That is one big pile of shit.
This movie was none other than the Goofy movie. Now, before we dive into the classic cinematic experience that is Goofy's debut, we first need to discuss Goofy himself. Goofy first appeared in 1932 in an animated short which was titled Mickey's Review. Now, at the time, he wasn't even called Goofy. He was known as Dippy Dog, who was an older, bearded audience member with a loud, distinctive laugh. The character was created by Pinto Colvig, who was a former circus clown who based the character on what he described as his local village idiot. Interesting. Goofy was pretty much a side character in these shorts. It wasn't until his 7th appearance in the Whoopie Party when Disney decided to drop the Dippy name, going for the more recognisable name of Goofy, which we all know him as today. Now, unlike Mickey Mouse, who was the everyman, he was a hero and a mascot, or Donald Duck, who was the short-tempered, angry-at-life character, Goofy was just a blissful idiot. He was a physical manifestation of things going wrong around you, but letting the outcome be defined by a positive attitude. This was on display the most in the 1940s with the How To series, which were shorts where a narrator would give instructions on how to perform specific tasks, with Goofy usually making an idiot of himself, failing at the activity that he was trying to accomplish. Some of my favourites of these shorts include How to Swim, How to Play Football, and I guess Goofy's glider also counts. I really like that one. In the 1950s, Disney introduced a version of Goofy known as George Geef. Now, this was a suburbanized middle-class Goofy who had a wife, who we actually never saw, a house in the suburbs, and a son, who was originally called Junior. Now, the George Geef era was a complete 180 from the How To shorts. The Geef era definitely grounded Goofy. He felt like most people who you would encounter in the 1950s in post-war America. He was no longer a silly cartoon character, he was a homeowner who had a wife and child, something many people could relate to at the time. Now before a Goofy movie could run, we needed Goof Troop to walk first. Goof Troop expanded on the George Geef side of Goofy. The series follows Goofy and his son, who's now named Max, and looks much more recognisable, as they move back to their hometown of Spoonerville, and of course they move in next door to an old high school friend, Pete, who we've seen multiple times across Disney shorts since 1928 Steamboat Willie. His character was used as an antagonist to whichever character the protagonist was in that short. Goof Troop was a success, and it wasn't long until Disney believed that the relationship between Max and Goofy could be a feature-length movie. Now, director Kevin Lima, who went on to direct Tarzan, stated that he didn't want to just make an 80-minute episode of Goof Troop, and had faith in the movie to be something completely original. At the time, Disney was planning on expanding its animation division beyond the Walt Disney Studios, and the Goofy movie was made by Disney Movie Tunes, which were usually the crew responsible for straight-to-DVD Disney movies. You know, like Aladdin 2 and The Lion King 1.5.
I got a really bad feeling.
It'll pass! Trust me, it'll pass!
Peak cinema. This studio usually produced movies that were lower budget, and in animation and cast, but a Goofy movie was an unusual hybrid. Instead of being straight to DVD, it was made for theatrical release, something that hadn't been seen from this studio before. Kevin Lima's inspiration for the film was a road trip movie, specifically the awkward feeling of being trapped on a family trip that you don't want to attend, and the fact that many stories can be created by putting two characters in close proximity for a long period of time, like unresolved tension, and to show a difference between the two characters on that trip. Lima wanted to move away from the classic Goofy tropes and make him seem more relatable and grounded, which was risky at the time for Disney to approve, since Goofy was known for falling over his own ears. How could we relate to this guy? Before I can explain to you why this movie is so good, we first need to run down the plot. The plot of the movie goes like this. It's the final day of school before summer. Max is now 14 years old, and will do anything to impress his crush Roxanne. Along with Pete's son PJ, Max decides to perform like Powerline, who's a Michael Jackson Prince hybrid character. He does a performance like him in the school assembly, which does in fact make Roxanne notice him. Roxanne then invites Max to a party where they'll all be watching Powerline live on TV. But due to Max's stunt in the assembly, his principal calls Goofy, warning him that Max is going down a dark path in life. Goofy is terrified of his son becoming a delinquent. He decides now is the perfect time for father and son bonding, and he takes Max across the country for a fishing trip, similar to what Goofy did with his father, keeping up the tradition. And they follow the map to Lake Destiny. Due to this, Max is terrified that he's going to lose the respect of Roxanne, and he makes up a story that he is going to the concert in person in Los Angeles to impress her. But obviously he is not going there. The rest of the movie is Goofy trying to make a good road trip for him and his son. Despite some of the activities not really being in Max's best interest, Goofy is just trying his best. They also encounter Pete and his son whilst on the trip. One key scene is when Goofy finds out that Max has been tampering with the map, which takes them to LA instead. Now the end of the movie involves Goofy and Max becoming part of the Powerline concert by accident. This impresses Roxanne, and the movie ends with Max finding out Roxanne likes him for who he is, and Goofy finally accepts that his son is growing up. Now on to why I think this movie is fantastic. The main focus of the movie is definitely the relationship between Goofy and Max. It is a perfect showcase of a generational gap. Goofy isn't an antagonist in this movie, but he is an obstacle for Max to overcome. I do feel bad for Goofy throughout this movie. He loves Max more than anything, but unfortunately this comes at a cost, as his methods are rooted in a world that no longer exists. He wants Max to be a child forever, and he misunderstands that Max doesn't want to go to Lester's Possum Park. He's becoming a teenager who likes Powerline and MTV, and Goofy mistakes this as an act of rebellion, that if he doesn't fix it now, he will lose his son forever. Goofy isn't ignorant throughout this. His actions are driven by real concern for his own child, which is something a lot of parents could relate to, the fear of no longer connecting with your child as they become independent. Max is one of the best and realistic teenage characters in animation. He isn't a bad kid who hates his father for the sake of being cool and edgy. He loves Goofy, and he respects his father. But Max is terrified of becoming Goofy. He wants to be his own individual self, rather than a clone of his father. There is this scene in the movie that reflects this perfectly, when Max starts to laugh and he laughs exactly like his dad. Now this attitude doesn't make Max 100% right either. Goofy may seem out of touch, but Max fails to see how important he is to his dad, and how much this trip means to him. The character of Roxanne is important to Max as she is a symbol of belonging to him. I find the relationship between Pete and PJ to be the most important in this movie. Hear me out, just hear me out. Their relationship is a perfect mirror to Goofy and Max. Pete believes in tough love, who believes that he needs to be dominant, and he has a lot of suspicion towards PJ. He straight up tells Goofy to keep Max under his thumb, which, nah, don't do that, that's not good. Which this confuses Goofy, as Goofy has trust for Max, but Pete is straight up controlling. It makes you really appreciate Goofy. Like, yeah, he may be annoying and seem out of touch to Max, but his heart is in the right place, unlike Pete, who was just driven by his own ego. A key moment in the plot and relationship between Max and Goofy is when Goofy and Pete are in the hot tub, and Pete tells Goofy that Max has changed the map without Goofy knowing. Now Goofy stands up for his son, believing in trust, and he doesn't want to check the map because he has so much faith in his son. The next day when driving, Goofy asks Max which direction they should take. Max is conflicted, but ultimately he chooses to go to LA, which just breaks Goofy, as Max broke the one thing he cared about the most, which was his trust. Now this leads to a heated argument between Max and Goofy, which leads them into water rapids, which I guess you could say is a clear metaphor for their relationship. And whilst they're arguing, we get this moment.
Not your little boy anymore, Dad. I've grown up. I've got my own life now. I know that. I just wanted to be part of it.
Hey, who left this bowl of onions here?
I love this scene, as Goofy goes from being his usual silly cartoon personality to a real father speaking from the heart. Now this leads to the two working together to navigate the rapids to safety, to the tune of Nobody Else But You, which is my favourite song in this movie. I think it perfectly captures how Goofy and Max are. They're completely different, but they are brought together through love. I want to talk about one scene that I absolutely love in this movie that really stood out to me. It's only small, but I really feel like it made a huge difference. When Goofy and Max are trapped in the car, with Bigfoot lurking outside, Goofy offers Max some soup, and the smile that Goofy gets on his face for the simple fact that Max is having some food, like, it's the small tiny things, but it makes Goofy this happy. Like, it's so simple, but it's definitely really heartwarming to me. You cannot talk about this movie without the music. Now while the score by Carter Burwell and Don Davis is excellent, the songs are what cemented the film's cult-like status. Songs such as After Today, which is a Broadway-style opening number that definitely captures the last day of school energy. On the Road Again is a classic travel song that definitely establishes the conflict. Goofy has so much optimism and Max is just full of misery. And of course Powerline songs like Stand Out and Eye to Eye. Now these are definitely the pillars of this movie. Eye to Eye in particular is the song about communication and seeing things from another perspective, which mirrors the film's theme perfectly. If we listen to each other, we're never too far apart. The voice cast was equally vital. Bill Farmer, who has voiced Goofy since 1987, gave the character a vulnerability which we had never seen before. And Jason Marsden provided the voice of Max, who perfectly captured the energy of a teenager. The chemistry between them was built through recording sessions, where the actors were encouraged to play off one another, something that wasn't always common in animation at the time. And like, goddamn did they do a good job as well. Now when a Goofy movie was released on April 7th, 1995, it was a modest success, earning about $35 million domestically, on a budget of around $18 million. Critics were lukewarm, many saw it as a video quality film that did not belong in the theatres.
You're not just wrong, you're stupid. And you're ugly, just like your mum.
However, the Goofy movie kids who grew up watching this on VHS began to realise something. When they were kids, they identified with Max. They felt the sting of being embarrassed by your parents and the rush of having a crush. And when they grew up and had children of their own, they suddenly found themselves identifying with Goofy. They realised that Goofy wasn't trying to be a nuisance. He was a man watching his best friend grow into a stranger, and doing everything in his power to hold on for one more mile. Which is why I think this movie is so underrated. It doesn't just tell a story to just get 80 minutes out the way and get DVD sales, it actually has a long-lasting impact. You watch it as a kid, and when you watch it as an adult, you see two very different movies. And you identify with two characters that are completely different to one another at different stages of your life. You can see yourself through both Goofy and Max. Because of this, the film has since exploded in popularity. It has its own dedicated panels at Disney conventions. It had limited edition merchandise, and even a Powerline appearance in the modern DuckTales reboot. It is a really rare film that captures a very specific moment in time, which is the 1990s, while dealing with a timeless theme, which is the bridge between childhood and adulthood. A Goofy movie is definitely more than a spin-off. It is an emotional look at the messy reality of family. It took a character who was literally designed to be two-dimensional, and it gave him a soul. It taught a generation that you don't have to be perfect to be a great dad. I guess you could say in the end, the perfect cast wasn't about catching a fish. It was about Goofy and Max finally standing on the same stage, dancing to the same beat, and realising that despite the ears, the clumsiness and the lies, they were exactly where they needed to be, which was together. The Goofy movie is on Disney+. I would 100% recommend you go see this movie if you haven't seen it, and if you haven't seen it in a while, go back and check it out. Like I said, if you remember it as a kid, you identify with Max. If you watch it now, you may see it through a completely different lens. And that is the end of today's video. Thank you all for watching, and thank you all for the support on my Bugs Life video. I really wasn't expecting that, so it was definitely a boosting confidence and motivation to make this video. I do have so many video ideas that I have wrote down, so I'm very excited to make some of those videos in the future. There's kind of a mix of everything. There isn't really going to be a set theme going forward, but it's definitely going to be based around animation and movies and stuff like that. So if that sounds interesting to you, make sure to leave a like and a subscribe. I will appreciate it forever. And yeah, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.